Hello everybody, welcome to another Versus Video Deck Tech. CVM here, joined once again.
BBD.
Mr. Braun-Duin, and we are battling Standard in the wake of the Season 2 Invitational in Columbus, the Grand Prix in Charlotte, which both were headlined by Modern. Now we get to set our eyes back to good old Standard.
Yep, there's a Standard Open and a Standard Grand Prix, both on the east to Midwest areas of the U.S.
Coast type things. Indianapolis for the Open and Providence for the Grand Prix. And there isn't a whole lot of new things in Standard. We shook things up a little bit with Green Red Devotion at the Invitational, but things are pretty much the same. And I have a sweet Mardu deck here. Mardu's nothing new, but there's a couple of unique cards. Some things that are kind of coming back in style. This was piloted by Jeff Hoogland at the Premier IQ, the 5K Premier IQ at the Invitational in Columbus, which he actually won. Let's take a look at it. So as you see here, it's just a normal Mardu type deck headlined by Crackling Doom as the Premier Mardu card. But we do have a little more aggressive side with Monastery Swiftspear alongside our 2-drop Secret of the Way and Soulfire Grandmaster. So that's where the uniqueness of it comes.
Yeah, lately we've just been seeing Mardu decks that are playing like Thunderbreak Regent and Stormbreath Dragon and sometimes Kolaghan, Storm's Fury, and just all these expensive 4s and 5-drop dragons. But this kind of harkens back to the old school era of just straight Mardu aggro.
Yeah, it's the Mardu Dragons deck started to pick up a little steam. But this is wanting to play Outpost Siege. So you can't really play, 4x Outpost Siege and your deck full of other 4 and 5 drops.
Yeah.
Because the power of Outpost Siege is just allowing you to cast basically every spell that gets flipped off of it while you're developing your board, either with or without cards in your hand. And if you have things like Kolaghan, Storm's Fury, Stormbreath Dragon, things like that, sometimes you just can't cast them when you flip a card off of your Outpost Siege. You just might not even have a 5th land, or you might have a land that comes into play tapped, or you're needing to use a removal spell to kill something that same turn. So when you're playing Outpost Siege, you want your deck to be a bit more lean.
Yeah, and this deck is, for the most part, fairly lean. A couple cards like Mardu Charm are a little bit on the more expensive end of the spectrum, but everything else is just super cheap, including Monastery Swiftspear, a card that we don't typically see in Mardu decks.
Yeah, so this deck is just trying to basically go under things. With Green Red Devotion having a bit of a resurgence at the Invitational, we can expect things to kind of go, back in full circle again to where we had post-Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir, where we just see a bunch of, Esper, Dragon, Blue-Black Control type decks. This deck is aiming to go under it with things like Monastery Swiftspear. We have utility with the Duress on Mardu Charm. It also can just kill an Ojutai if it's tapped with the 4 damage to a creature. And then something like Outpost Siege is very difficult for those types of decks to handle.
Yeah, once you start chaining cards together with Outpost Siege, they'll fall behind really fast. Especially if there are things that you can cast. A lot of times decks playing Outpost Siege are hitting these cards that they can't really cast. They're like dragons or removal spells that don't deal damage. All these removal spells, with the exception of Cut, actually can just be sent at the dome for damage. So you're not hitting Chain to the Rocks that doesn't do anything.
Exactly. Which is another card that has kind of just disappeared in Standard with the printing of Dramoka's Command. It's basically made Chain to the Rocks unplayable.
Yeah, and Chain to the Rocks, I think there's a few other reasons too. Cards like Silumgar the Drifting Death and Ojutai and things like that aren't, you can't remove them effectively with Chain to the Rocks has also helped push the card out.
Yeah, for sure. The one card that is glaringly missing from this deck is Hordling Outburst. It's been a long-time staple of the Mardu/Red-White decks, and we see that it's just not here. We do have Stoke the Flames, but in a world where you don't have a Tarkus Command to take advantage of having all of the extra tokens, just paying 3 mana for 3 1/1s isn't going to be very good if you're facing down Deathmist Raptors and Sylvan Caryatids and Corsair Kufix. So having something that's going to hit a little bit harder when you can get through with it is going to end up being a little bit better.
Yeah, Hordling Outburst is great in a field where your opponent's only playing a few threats in their deck, like Corsair and Rhino, and that's about the extent of their creatures. You can just, Mardu Charm or Stoke their Corsair, Crackling Doom the Rhino, and then your Hordling Outburst tokens are going to keep getting in every single turn. But nowadays, everyone's filling their deck with so many creatures like Satyr Wayfinders and Den Protectors, Deathmist Rappers, all these like 2/2 morphs that just pretty conveniently block these tokens.
Yep. As far as the land base goes, we see, we only have 9 come into play tapped lands, which is, I'd say, about average for what the Mardu decks were playing before. When we had Chain to the Rocks still in the deck, we would play less because you had to have a billion mountains in your deck. Once it moved away from Chain to the Rocks, you would see, somewhere between 9 and 12 tapped lands. I honestly feel like it should even be less, but I just like to cast my spells on curve.
I think it's really funny that you said we only have 9 tap lands in our aggro deck.
Right?
Only 9. That's just like something that 4 years ago you would just never say something like that.
Yeah.
You'd have like 3 at most or whatever. It's kind of
if any.
If any, yeah. It's kind of crazy how different Standard is now than it was then. Like, we're just used to playing all these, we're used to everything just being a little bit slower, but...
Slower but bigger and hitting way harder.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the temples allow you to keep, hands that you couldn't normally keep. The range of keepable hands is just huge, and I'm really excited to see what'll happen once they're gone. Now that they made Scry an evergreen mechanic, there's a chance that this could just be the cycle of lands that they reprint in Origins. Yeah. I hope they don't, because I want to see what happens when we don't have Scry lands as a crutch.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm really rooting for the check lands, people call them, like Isolated Chapel and Sun Petal Grove. I really like those lands. I know that they did them so many times in a row, so they got rid of them, but honestly, those lands were just good lands for Standard.
Fair enough. Well, this is the main deck here in a nutshell. I'm excited to battle with this deck as I'm actually considering a Mardu type deck for Indianapolis. But let's take a look at the sideboard since Mr. Hoogland has, a very Hoogland-esque sideboard. All right, we are back with the sideboard for the Mardu, air quotes, aggro deck.
Yeah.
As we can see here, we have a 25th land along with some very controlling cards. So one of the standards for Mardu decks ever since Brad Nelson unleashed it on a West Coast Grand Prix. I think it was San Diego, maybe?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Many moons ago. This is just to sideboard into a more controlling deck, since the threats that you are likely beating them with in Game 1, the answers for those threats are going to line up poorly against something like Elspeth Sun's Champion. So we have 3 Elspeth, a Sarkhan, the Dragon Speaker, 2 End Hostilities, 2 Glare of Heresy, 2 Anger of the Gods. Again, our 25th land, since we're bringing in the Elspeths, and then 4 Thoughtseize just to round out our entire control package. I think that this is a good plan. I do like it. However, we're to the point now where it's almost expected.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of games where you'll side into it, underestimating your opponent, and they'll just know what plan you're on and side accordingly. So I think it's appropriate to kind of change it up every now and then, where you don't side into this plan, or if you happen to be on the play for Game 3, you can go back to a more aggressive style deck. But you do want to be flexible with your sideboard, even when you do have an overhaul package like this, where you're going to change the theme of your deck.
Another thing too is there is a real cost to playing 3 Elspeths and only 25 lands with no ability to draw cards.
Outside of Outpost Siege, but yeah.
Yeah, outside of Outpost Siege. So that is a real cost as well. Something to keep in mind when you side into these strategies is you need to make sure that you can survive long enough to cast Elspeth, and it's not like turn 6 Elspeth, it's like turn 9 Elspeth or turn 10 Elspeth.
Yeah, thankfully the temples help with that significantly.
Yeah.
And as we see here, the extra land is another temple to go in the deck, which will bring us up to 6. But yeah, you do have to be able to survive, and that's what cards like Thoughtseize, Anger of the Gods, and Hostilities will help you do.
Yep.
Not to mention the deck is just already full of a bunch of removal, so it's pretty sweet. Brian is playing a Abzan Aggro list of his designs, similar to what you guys played at the Pro Tour and then the subsequent Grand Prix.
Yeah, I'm going back to the Pro Tour list that we played. Basically, I feel like the format has kind of reversed itself back to the style of format it was when we played that list of the Pro Tour. People are back to playing Green Red Devotion again. People are back to playing these Stormbreath Dragon, Thunderbreak Regent decks. And those were the kinds of decks that we expected to play at the Pro Tour when we played a list that had Ultimate Price and Surak the Hunt Caller, and like we had these cheap removal spells and Suraks, and our goal was to just get underneath people and just be faster than them, not care about their dragons because we're just killing them faster than they're killing us. So that's kind of where I've gone back to, even to the point where I'm playing Self-Inflicted Wound in the main deck, which it's going to be dead in a few matchups, but there's usually always something.
Yeah, I mean, white's pretty good.
Yeah.
White and green are both very good in the current standard. So make sure you stick around for the actual video and jump into the battles.